And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. A lot is going on due to the fact we have another area of low pressure coming out of the North Pacific crossing the lower Alaska Peninsula. This is an impactful storm. It has a large circulation around it and a fair amount of moisture. But one thing we can see here at the state of the sea ice as of this Tuesday afternoon, the edge of the pack ice a little more ragged. We've seen openings here developing south side of St. Lawrence Island along areas of the YK deltas and along the southern shore there of the Seward Peninsula, especially from around Shaktoolik, Golovin over toward Nome. And as the fact we are into spring now, this process, the ice will continue to gradually melt and break up a bit more. And we have active weather that'll help facilitate some of that. What we are watching is this low, although not especially deep at 976 millibars late tonight into early Wednesday morning. That low will cross the lower Alaska Peninsula and head up toward the YK deltas for Wednesday into Wednesday evening. This front will expand north and northeastward up into the southwest and western interior, as well as across the western Gulf. Strong winds will develop as this pressure gradient tightens. Areas along outside Hinchinbrook entrance will develop some storm force winds, as well as down here at the entrance of Cook Inlet as we get into Wednesday. Meanwhile, on the backside of this low, the Pribilovs down into the eastern Aleutians will experience storm force winds. And again, snowfall totals here where there is a winter storm warning for the eastern Aleutians, including Nikolsky as well as Dutch Harbor on Alaska. As much as 8 to 20 inches of heavy wet snow. That snow will expand tonight into the Kuskokwim, lower Yukon deltas, a quick burst of maybe 3 to as much as 7, 8 inches of snow and gusty winds. Meanwhile, along areas of the Kenai, eastern Kenai coast up along Prince William Sound, anywhere from 1.5 inches to as much as 3-4 inches of heavier rainfall, including Seward, Whittier. So again, this is going to be a very wet and windy system coming up into the western Gulf as well. And eventually all that moisture, some of it will cross the Brooks Range to along the Arctic coast. By the time we get into Thursday, we have blizzard warnings in effect for early Thursday morning through Friday evening, all the way from the Lisburn Peninsula, Utqiagvik eastward toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Bay. That low, the original low, will have crossed up here into the lower Yukon by Thursday afternoon. We have the original front kind of pushed into the interior and then finishing its way into the Gulf, with a secondary weaker low developing there in the western Gulf, and then a kind of just a secondary pivot trough there south of the main low. So kind of a complex system, but nevertheless, by late in the week, that system will finally begin to weaken. Wednesday, though, we're looking at a mixed bag of winds for the inner channels of the Panhandle. We're looking at south winds 10 knots, Lynn Canal, waves 2-3 feet. Southeast winds 15 knots, Stevens Passage, maybe 2-3 foot waves there. And northwest winds 10 knots, waves foot or two here, Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Just westerly winds there off of Craig at 10 knots, turning southerly south of Sitka, 15 to 20 knots. But as we get over toward Cape Suckling, we have easterly gales picking up to 40 knots in advance, just because of the way you get those barrier jets when a front starts approaching and nudging up against the northern Gulf Coast. For the inner channels for Thursday, winds will be south-southeast, 15 knots, waves generally running a few feet. Outer coast, Sitka, southward, look for south-southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. But as you get up outside of the Icy Strait and up outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling, look for east-southeast winds 30 to 35 knots. Now across the northwestern Gulf on Wednesday, that's where we have some stronger winds. 45 to 50 knot winds, lower Cook Inlet outside of Kennedy Entrance, 50 knot easterly storm force winds with waves building 15 to 16 feet. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, we're looking at 45 knot easterly gales, perhaps gusting to 50 knots. We have within Prince William Sound, we have easterly winds of 30 knots, but gusts of 45 knots. So again, these stronger winds will be developing through the day as the pressure gradient tightens with that approaching front. And then for Thursday, we still have south-southeast winds of 30-35 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. Within Prince William Sound, 30-knot southeast winds with waves running 6-7 feet. And then down here across Lower Cook Inlet, south winds of 30 knots with waves 5 to 8 feet. Now you can clearly see that low pressure circulation for Wednesday. The low will be lifting northward of the Alaska Peninsula outside here of Bristol Bay in the southeast corner of the Bering. So ahead of it, southeast to east winds 25 to 30 knots across Kodiak Island, 35 knot southeast gales there in the vicinity and east of Chiknik. But as we get around the backside of the low, we'll have Cold Bay Falls Pass with northwest winds 30 to 35 knots, highest waves there just to the northwest of Cold Bay at 12 to 14 feet. For Thursday, those winds are going to come down. We are looking at southwest to south winds, Kodiak Island 25 to 30 knots, and then as we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, generally westerly winds at 25 to 30 knots for the day Thursday. Now the eastern Aleutians, we're looking at at least 45 knot northwesterly gales. Could be some gusts still at storm force, and waves as high as 20 plus feet there to outside of Dutch Harbor on Alaska. And again, still snowing hard in areas, so additional heavy wet snowfall. By the time we come into Thursday, though, those winds come down, shift more westerly to 30 knots as we get toward Nikolsky out across Atka to Adak. We're looking at southwest winds of 25 knots, and then finally as we get out here west of Adak, south-southwest winds around 25 knots. And then along the Pribilovs for Wednesday, winds, we're anticipating northwest winds at least 45 knots, some higher gusts. East winds 30 knots within the wider expanse of Bristol Bay. Northeast winds 30 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay. And then along the lower Yukon Delta, north winds to 35 knots there, Hooper Bay down to the north side of St. Lawrence, or rather Nunavik Island, and northeast winds of 25 knots out of Norton Sound. Thursday winds will continue to come down across the region. Generally west-northwest winds around 25 knots, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay back toward St. Matthew down into the Pribilovs. Winds will be a bit lighter across the Yukon coast. North-northwest winds 15 knots with just north winds here between Nome and Imanik there at 10 knots. And then along the Bering Strait, north winds of 20 knots on Wednesday, a little higher, 25 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. As we come up along the Chukchi Sea coast, the northwest coast there, look for northeast winds of 20 knots. And then along the Beaufort Sea coast, east-northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. But keep in mind, as we go through Wednesday night, there is going to be a band of light snow lift across the Brooks Range north slope and then a line along the entire Arctic coast, especially Point Lay on over to Kaktovik. So Thursday morning, we're anticipating building winds, these polar northeast to easterly winds, 30-35 knots with some higher gust and light snow falling. So blizzard warning is in effect from Point Hope all the way through Utqiagvik to Kaktovik for Thursday, continuing into the day on Friday. So if you have anything you need to get done safely, do that on Wednesday, because conditions will be rapidly deteriorating early Thursday morning across this region and will likely remain touch and go into the day until late Friday evening. And winds as we come on down through the Chukchi Sea, east-northeast here along the area of Wainwright down to Point Hope, and then through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island on Thursday, we do expect northerly winds at 25 knots.